Hello viewers, welcome back to the part 2 of this session on avian diversity and classification. So now that we have learned the basic principles of avian taxonomy, we will now see how Indian birds are currently classified as per modern systems. So what you see here is the dendrogram of avian orders reconstructed based on their putative evolutionary relationships as sourced out from a couple of recent publications, mainly one from Joel Cracroft 2003 in Howard and Moore's 4th edition, and another recent one is from Hackett et al. 2008 in Science. So these two sources give out a good overview of the modern classification of the orders. So the first clade, comprising Anseriformes and Galliformes, is the basal to all the other extant birds. So Anseriformes include ducks, geese and swans, a majority of which are winter visitors to India. So Galliformes includes what are generally known as game birds, like the fowl-like terrestrial birds that includes quails, partridges, francolins, purfowl, pheasants, and also the peafowl, national bird of India. So the next clade is composed of three orders: Phoenicopteriformes of flamingos that feed largely in brackish waters, and Podicipitiformes with grebes, small to medium sized freshwater birds that often dive into waters for foraging. The third group in this clade is the Phytontiformes, formed by tropic birds, small pelagic birds with long tailed streamers, and often seen along the sea coast immediately after the tropical storms. Then comes the doves and pigeons and sandgrouses, forming the next clade. Sandgrouses of the order Pterocliformes are medium sized birds with visibly perceptibly chunky bodies and longish tails. They are typically found in semi-arid tracts and are known to commute long distances in search of water sources in huge flocks. So of course doves and pigeons, another sister taxa to the sandgrouse, are very well known group of birds, and some species, especially the rock pigeons, have been domesticated extensively from for a very long time. Then nightjars of Caprimulgiformes and swifts of Apodiformes are the insectivorous groups of birds often treated in a single order. So some authorities treat them as a single order as Caprimulgiformes, or some authorities split them into two, though they are extremely closely related to each other. So nightjars, as the name suggests, are primarily nocturnal insectivorous, and swifts are tiny aerial insectivores, some of which are known to nest in deep caves, deep dark caves, using echolocation. And swifts are also known for their torpor, the facultative ability to get into a physiological inactivity phase during harsh winters. So the next clade is composed of cranes, bustards and cuckoos. So cranes and rails of the order Gruiformes are medium to large birds, while rails and crakes are confined to well vegetated wetlands. Cranes are partial to wet grasslands, and some of the cranes are long distance migrants too. Bustards and floricans of the order Otidiformes are birds of semi-arid open grasslands, and they are perhaps the most threatened or endangered groups among the Indian avifauna. For example, the great Indian bustard, of which the picture is shown here, is an iconic species of India, now confined only to northwestern Indian desert and semi-arid tracts. There's only about 120 individuals that live today. And cuckoos are canopy living birds which are known for their brood parasitic behavior and has been much celebrated in our mythology and literature. The next clade is a fairly large one, mostly of water birds and also the sea birds, sometimes also called pelagic birds. So the first one is the Gaviform, order Gaviforms of loons and or sometimes called divers. They are large grebe-like seabirds, known for their diving foraging behavior in offshore waters. Then order Procelariforms represents the typical tube-nosed seabirds. So these seabirds, like shearwaters, petrels, storm petrels, so they do have a tube-like structure just over their upper mandible, upper bill, which actually exudes the excess salt since they feed on marine organisms, fishes and marine organisms. So they need to excrete the excess salt. So that's why they are called tube-nosed seabirds. So they spend most part of their lives over the offshore waters, and they are descending to land only for breeding for a very short time. And this clade also has typical fish-eating birds like cormorants, darters and boobies belonging to the order Suliforms, and order Pelicaniforms that has large-bodied water birds like pelicans, herons, egrets, ibises and bitterns. Interestingly, storks of the order Sigoniforms, whose taxonomic position was debated much over the few decades, have now been found to be actually closely related to this particular clade. The next clade includes three very dissimilar looking taxa: waders, raptors and owls. So the order Charadoriforms is formed by the typical shorebirds or waders, including plovers, sandpipers, snipes, stints, godwits. So you often find them foraging and wading through the shallow waters along the edges of the water bodies, freshwater bodies, and sometimes even the coastal lagoons and mud flats. That's why they are called as waders, and they are very most of them are migratory, long distance migrants. Then the raptors of the order Accipitriforms are very well known birds, being the carnivores among the avifauna, and they are the top apex of the food chain. And owls or Strigiforms, they are another monophyletic group which are mostly known for their nocturnality, and they also sometimes lumped with raptors, colloquially speaking, as nocturnal raptors. The next clade consists of woodpeckers and a group of woodland avifauna earlier put together under a larger order Coraciforms, like include trogons, the birds of the evergreen forests, and kingfishers of the wooded wetlands, bee eaters and hornbills, the world frugivores. And hornbills, of course, are very popular, known for their bizarre nesting behavior, where the females get incarcerated inside a tree cavity, and then females come out only after the hatching of the chicks. And woodpeckers and barbets comprise the order Pisiformes. So along with Pisiformes and the other three orders, they form the larger clade. The last of these clades includes falcons, parakeets and passerines or songbirds. Very recently, falcons were found to be unrelated to other raptors, and they are actually found to be sister taxa to parakeets. Ecological divergence perhaps drives these disparate food habits. This clade also comprises the order Passeriformes of songbirds or perching birds. The largest groups of birds with over 60% of the world's avifauna is actually falling under passeriforms. They are marked by very unique perch mechanism on their legs, so that they actually, it's a musculature which actually helps them to perch very tightly when they lower their body, and a heterodactyl feet, the hallux behind and 3 toes in front, and the presence of well developed syringeal muscles. That's why sometimes they are also called songbirds. So most of the common birds and urban birds and birds in the agro ecosystem that we see every day actually belong to the passeriforms, or the so called songbirds, or the passerines, or perching birds. We will now see some of the novel findings from the molecular taxonomy. So traditionally, we have the morphological taxonomy, comparative anatomy to classify birds. But last 3 decades, the molecular taxonomy have thrown up several new findings. So we will see some of them which pertains with particular reference to Indian avifauna. The first major thing is that creeps and flamingos, and though creeps and flamingos were suspected by some authors to be closely related, but their molecular signatures have strongly demonstrated a very close relationship, though they morphologically they are very, very distinct. And storks, as I said, they are finally found to be basal to the large bodied water birds in the in that clade which is shared by both Syconiforms and the Pelagioniforms. And very interestingly, among the raptors, bearded vulture or lammergeier in the which we will find in the Indian subcontinents along the Himalayas, and Egyptian vulture which can be found on the mainland India, are not true vultures, but they are very close to the honey buzzards and buzzards, the other raptors. But perhaps they developed their scavenging behavior as a convergent behavior, as a process of convergence. Then comes the button quail. For a very long time, button quail's taxonomic position was hotly debated. Actually, they look like quail, but they were actually put under the gruiforms, the cranes, rails and crakes, because they were possessed by 3 toes. The hind toe hallux is absent in button quail. So, but the molecular taxonomy clearly reveals that actually button quails are basal to all the other waders or shorebirds. Though button quails they are not exactly a wetland bird, they are actually birds of the open dry grasslands. Next comes the sand grouse. Sand grouse, they do look like, they actually look like some intermediate form between a game bird, a fowl and a pigeon. So they were very variously classified close to the wildfowl or close to the waders. But now sometimes later people they also been put along with the pigeons because of their particularly because of the water drinking behavior. So, but now molecular evidences clearly prove that sand grouses are actually sister taxa to pigeons and doves. Then comes the falcons. As I said earlier, the falcons are not related to other raptors, instead they are sister taxa to parrots. Well, the only similarity that we can see is the shape of their bill, but otherwise ecologically and behaviorally they are very different. Among the passerines, shrike babblers, see there are 8 species of shrike babblers in the Indian subcontinent. They are actually the oriental birds. So for a long time they were considered as babblers because they typically behave like babblers in the along the Himalayan forests. And but later they have now found to belong to the New World family of vireos. So what you see here, the first picture is that green shrike babbler, the second one is that actually the New World vireo, the Hutton's vireo. So they look quite similar to the vireos, but nobody really suspected that they could actually belong to the same clade. So this is quite, in fact, this created a lot of flutter among the biogeographers in the Indian subcontinent, because vireos are New World family and they never had any members from the Old World, and shrike babblers seem to be the connecting link between the New World and the Old World. So perhaps it's very interesting that the origin and radiation, these things. So perhaps the hypothesis is that vireos, perhaps they originated from the Old World, they colonized the New World, but then they became extinct from the Old World. But a offshoot of that ended up with shrike babblers, which became adaptive, through adaptive convergence, they actually looked like other babblers. And very interestingly, white eyes, very common birds of the hill gardens, hilly regions and gardens. So they were, along with Euhanas, they belong to the babbler clade, because white eyes are always treated along with sunbirds, flower peckers and other things, because white eyes are also nectarivorous, largely nectarivorous birds, though they do take insects and fruits sometimes. So, and Euhanas, the second picture that you see here is the Euhana, and that was always considered as babblers. But the molecular phylogeny reveals that both Euhanas and white eyes, they belong to the same family, the white eye family, Zoostropidae. But then again, the white eyes are not, they again belong to the actual babbler clade. And Sylvia warblers. So it's a long distance migrant. In winter, they are very common, particularly lesser white-throat, a very common winter visitor to the most part of India. So again, Sylvia warblers are actually not warbler, but are actually they are babblers. So that's another interesting, arrangement of what we call as the superfamily Sylviidae. Then Preenias. See, Preenias are actually another passerines, so insectivorous passerines with very long tail, with black and white tip on the tail. And Preenias generally, reside in shrubs and grasslands and reeds. So there were two Preenias, rufous-vented Preenia in the Indus plains and swamp Preenia in the Assam plains, Brahmaputra flood plains. So they were found to be actually not Preenias, though they look exactly like other Preenias and they behave like Preenias, but they were apparently found as babbler, belonging to the what we call as ground babblers of the family Pelorniidae. Actually, in fact, they were much closer to our puff-throated babbler, which is very common in the forests of the peninsular India. This is again very interesting finding, especially by Robin et al. The Western Ghats laughing thrushes. See, laughing thrushes are a group of babblers which within the Indian subcontinent, especially particularly, they are very diverse along the Himalayas. More than 20-25 species of laughing thrushes are there. They occur in flocks, and they are called laughing thrushes because their calls actually are they make very cacophony of calls and laughter like cackles. So we have actually 4 species of laughing thrushes along the Western Ghats. In fact, there are 3 species, but now they were found to be actually 4 species. So they were considered as the remnants of the laughing thrush radiation from the northeast. But Robin et al. Found through molecular phylogeny that they form a very distinct clade within the laughing thrushes and babblers family. And so they erected a new genus Monticicla for them actually. And same Robin et al. Also studied these Western Ghats shortwings. See, there are 2, in fact, the earlier 1, but now 2 species. There are 2 species of shortwings are there along the Western Ghats, and Nilgiri shortwing and the white-bellied shortwing. So shortwings are actually closer to the babblers, and they were kind of babblers, intermediate between babblers and shorts and robins. So these shortwings are quite common along the eastern Himalaya. There are 5 to 6 species of shortwings along the Himalayas, and there were 2 in the Western Ghats. But Rasmussen, when she studied the skins and other vocalizations, and actually tentatively put the shortwings as under robins, blue robins. So when our Indian ornithologist Robin and his team did the molecular phylogeny, they found that actually Western Ghats shortwings are completely unique and hitherto undescribed taxa. In fact, nobody really suspected that they could actually form a completely new bird taxa. So they had to give a new name for that, and they gave the name Sholakhilis. In Malayalam, the Sholakhili refers to, because Sholakhili is the local name in the distribution range, because they are found typically in the high altitude evergreen shola forests in the Western Ghats. So those are the novel findings, but when we'll also look at the diversity of Indian birds. So in the world, all over the world, there are 10,000 species of birds, of which 1300 occurs in India. So almost 12%, almost 12% of the world's avifauna are found in India. In fact, India tops 9th in the rank in terms of number of bird species. And these 1300 species of India are represented by 489 genera, under 113 families, and 26 orders, sometimes 27 orders if you separate swifts and nightjars into separate orders. See, among these Indian avifauna, almost 78% are actually breeding birds, meaning that they actually breed, nest within Indian limits. So, but remember that most of these birds that breed, especially along the Himalayas and the northern Indian Gangetic plains, they do also winter in the southern India. So if you look at the actual number of species that breed and that migrate, is it differs between northern and southern India. But when we take India as a whole, 78% of them are actually breeding birds and 13% of the winter visitors. So this means that this 13% of the birds are the migrants, long distance migrants from Europe, Central Asia, Eastern Asia. So, and also very rarely even the Middle East and the Central Asia as well. So 1% is the passage migrant, like rufous-tailed rock thrush, or even Amur falcon. So they are the passage migrants. They just pass through the Indian subcontinent. Though they, few individuals might overstay here, might overwinter here, but mostly they pass through India. And there 1% is occasional visitors, mostly by the seabirds and pelagic birds, and 7% are vagrants. Vagrants are actually stragglers, in the sense that there are historically there might be 3, maximum 3 or 4 records. Let's say 3 records over the last 50 years, then we would call them as vagrants. And since birds can fly, so it's very natural to expect some individuals of the species losing its way, or just might randomly they might end up here by random movements. And sometimes even ship assisted vagrants are also there, especially for the water birds and seabirds. So if we look at the biogeography region wise, so naturally Eastern Himalaya has the highest diversity of birds, like almost 831 species, followed by Western Himalaya 586 species and Gangetic plains of 505 species. And of course the Lakshadweep, being very small in size, have only 81 species recorded from these things. So if you look at the major taxonomic group wise, it is the what we call the family Massicapidae. It contains robins, chats and flycatchers. It's a large family under the passerine. It's a large songbird family in India with over 100 species, followed by raptors, 61 species of raptors and 57 species of laughing thrushes and Tardoides babblers. And so this graph shows perhaps the top 20 or 25 groups of birds with the highest number of species. And if you look at the popular groups, that's the earlier classification was by the taxonomic wise. But if you look if you classify by popular group, it's the songbird or land birds which form the largest part of Indian avifauna. Almost 736 species out of 1300 are actually belong to songbirds or the land bird, what we call as passerines, followed by non-passerine land birds, 167 species like hornbills, woodpeckers, bee eaters, rollers, kingfishers, and raptors, 110 species of raptors. Here raptors include both diurnal and nocturnal raptors like owls. Then waders, we have 77 species of waders and 47 species of small bodied water birds like grebes, and also rails and crags. Then game birds, the fowl like birds like partridges, quails, they have 46 species, and the large bodied water birds like egrets, herons and storks. So they have 45 species we have in India, and 43 species of seabirds are there in our Indian seas, Arabian Sea, Bay of Bengal and the Indian Ocean. So 43 are the ducks and geese, and 17 species of aerial birds, mainly composed of swifts and swallows. And of course, then there are only 10 species of the large bodied land birds. That includes like cranes, bustards, and other large bodied land birds things. So we have 1300 species of bird, 1341 to be more precise as per the Praveen et al.'s latest estimate. So out of which 1341 species of Indian birds, 78 species are actually endemic to India, in the sense the political boundaries of India. Of course, endemism is a concept that's really applicable to a biogeographic region or a distinct geological or geographic unit like an island or a particular mountain chain, like birds endemic to the Western Ghats or something like that. But often we also use this concept as for the political boundaries. So if you look at the political boundaries of India, we have 78 species which are endemic to India. That means that they are not found anywhere else in the world. They are found only within the Indian limits. Like the example, there are two species of tits shown here. Indian yellow tit, which has a very wide range, but within the Indian limits, like the southwestern and central and eastern India. On the contrary, we have white-naped tit, which have extremely localized distributions in the northwestern and southern India. So both the species are endemic to India, though their distribution ranges differ vastly in size. So among these 78 species, these are the split up of these 78 species as per their biogeographic regions. The highest number of endemic species naturally found in Andaman and Nicobar Islands, because Andaman and Nicobar Islands are very isolated for a very long time. So there was endemism is likely to be much higher. So there are 29 species are endemic to Andaman and Nicobar, followed by Eastern Himalaya. There is 19 species and also the Western Ghats, 27 species. 27 species are actually the Western Ghats, and Western Himalaya has 10 species in contrast to Eastern Himalaya, which has 19 species among the endemics. And of course, Assam Plains has 4 species, and there are other biogeographical units have 1 species each, like Indus Plain, Central India, like forest owlet, Southern Andhra Pradesh, like Jadon's courser, and Deccan, South Deccan, the yellow-throated bulbul. So, before we finish this talk, there are a couple of questions for you to just to think over. The first is that I said that there are 78 species of birds endemic to India, right? So, but even if you exclude the Andaman and Nicobar, 29 species, that means only 49, only about 50 species in the Indian mainland are actually endemic to India. That's pretty very low in number compared to the 1300 species that are known to occur in the mainland India. So, out of 1300 species, only 50 species are actually endemic to the mainland India. So, why are there so few endemics in the mainland India? Yeah, just think over it. There are quite a few hypotheses and theories that have been prescribed, but there still still eludes a single definite answer to these things, but it would be interesting to know about your views as well. And the second question that I want you to think over is, why are there no endemic birds in Lakshadweep Islands? So, we saw that Andaman and Nicobar Islands have 29 species are endemic, because these islands are isolated and so they could pave way for a lot of endemism. But in the same logic, Lakshadweep Islands, which are also isolated, why didn't have a single endemic bird? So, just you can think over it and these things. Okay. Thank you. So, if you have any questions or if you have any clarifications that you require or questions, please feel free to write to me at raja.jp@gmail.com. Thank you very much.